Montag wird versendet für den Zauber. Also jeder 20 Tickets, je nachdem wie viel Punkte jeder hat.
He thought he was marrying a saint. He was dead wrong. Lorenzo Moretti, the ruthless capo known as the Wolf of Brooklyn, had the world at his feet, an empire built on fear, a fortune in blood money, and Vanessa the stunning high society fiancée who charmed everyone she met. But inside the iron gates of the Moretti estate, a dark secret was festering. While Lorenzo was out controlling the city, his beloved ailing mother was living in a nightmare. It wasn't until a timid, debt-ridden maid named Sophie decided she had nothing left to lose that the truth shattered Lorenzo's world. What Sophie did wasn't just brave, it was unthinkable, and it started a war. The air in the Moretti estate always smelled of expensive leather and cold ambition. For Lorenzo Moretti, the 32-year-old head of the New York crime syndicate, this house was supposed to be a sanctuary. Outside these walls, he was a monster to his enemies. Inside, he was a dutiful son. Lorenzo straightened his tie in the hallway mirror. He looked tired. The war with the rival Russo family was taking its toll, but he pushed the fatigue down. He had a dinner to attend with the city's corrupt zoning commissioner, a meeting that would secure the construction contracts for the next decade. "Enzo, darling, are you leaving already?" The voice was like silk wrapping around a jagged rock. Vanessa Sterling descended the grand staircase. She was a vision in emerald green, the dress hugging her curves in a way that usually made Lorenzo pause. She was the daughter of a bankrupt shipping magnate, a woman who brought legitimacy to Lorenzo's rough edges. She was perfect, or so it seemed. "I have to Ness," Lorenzo said, accepting her kiss. It felt practiced. "How is Mama today?" Vanessa's face fell into a mask of tragic concern. "Oh, Enzo, it's hard. Isabella was confused again this morning. She threw her oatmeal at me. But don't worry. I cleaned it up. I know it's just the dementia talking." Lorenzo sighed a heavy, painful sound. His mother Isabella had been the Iron Lady of the family until the stroke 3 years ago. Now she was a shadow drifting in and out of reality. "I don't know what I'd do without you," Lorenzo said, gripping Vanessa's hand. "Most women would have left. Taking care of an invalid isn't what you signed up for." "I signed up for you," Vanessa cooed, straightening his collar. "Go, make us some money. I'll take care of Mama." Lorenzo left the heavy oak doors closing with a thud. From the shadows of the kitchen hallway, Sophie Miller watched the scene with a knot in her stomach. Sophie was 22, invisible and terrified. She wore the grey uniform of the help, a stark contrast to Vanessa's emerald silk. Sophie wasn't here by choice. Her father, a gambling addict, owed the Moretti family $50,000. Sophie was working off the debt, scrubbing floors and changing sheets to keep her father's kneecaps intact. She gripped the handle of her mop until her knuckles turned white. She knew the truth. She knew that the moment Lorenzo's black SUV cleared the gates, the saint Vanessa would drop the act. Sophie had seen the bruises on Isabella's arms. She had heard the whispers, the cruel insults hissed in the old woman's ear when no one was looking. But Sophie was a nobody. If she spoke up, who would believe the daughter of a degenerate gambler over the future Mrs. Moretti? "What are you staring at?" "Trash!" Sophie jumped. Vanessa was standing there, the loving fiancée mask gone. Her eyes were cold, dead sharks. "Nothing, Miss Sterling," Sophie stammered, looking at the floor. "Just preparing Mrs. Moretti's tea." "Make sure it's hot," Vanessa sneered, turning on her heel. And stay out of the West Wing. I'm having a private chat with the old hag. Sophie's heart hammered against her ribs. Private chat. She knew what that meant. It was 8:00 p.m. Outside, a thunderstorm was battering the New York skyline, masking the sounds of the city. Inside the Moretti mansion, the silence was heavy. Lorenzo was delayed. A shipment at the docks had been intercepted, and he was currently in a warehouse in Queens, breaking fingers to find the rat. He wouldn't be home for hours. Sophie was in the kitchen trembling as she arranged a tray of biscuits. Her hands shook so badly, she nearly dropped the porcelain saucer. She could hear it from upstairs, the thumping. Thump, thump. It wasn't the sound of a cane. It was the sound of something striking flesh and bone. Sophie closed her eyes, tears leaking out. "Don't get involved," her father had begged her. "Keep your head down, do the work, and we get out alive." But then she heard the voice. It wasn't a scream. It was a whimper. Isabella Moretti, the woman who used to terrify grown men, was crying like a child. "Please, Vanessa, no more. Shut up. Drink it." Vanessa's voice was screeching, unrecognizable. Sophie looked at the ceiling. She thought of her own mother, who had died when she was 10. She thought of how Isabella had once smiled at her in a rare moment of clarity, and told her she had kind eyes. "I can't do this," Sophie thought. "I can't just listen." She grabbed the tea tray, a flimsy excuse, and walked toward the stairs. Her legs felt like lead. Every step was a potential death sentence. If Vanessa caught her spying, Sophie would be on the street, and her father would be dead by morning. She reached the door to Isabella's room. It was cracked open just an inch. Sophie peered through the gap. The sight froze the blood in her veins. Isabella was tied to her wheelchair with a silk scarf. Her white hair was disheveled, her lip bleeding. Vanessa stood over her, holding a cup of scalding hot tea. "You spilled it on me this morning, didn't you?" Vanessa hissed, tilting the cup. "You ruined my manicure, you senile old witch." I didn't mean to," Isabella sobbed. "Lorenzo thinks you're a tragedy." Vanessa laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "But you're just an obstacle. Once you're gone, and I have the ring, I'm sending you to the cheapest, filthiest state home I can find. But first, you need to learn respect." Vanessa tilted the cup further. Steam rose from the liquid. Sophie didn't think. She didn't calculate the debt. She didn't think about the Mafia. A primal rage, hot and blinding, took over. She kicked the door open. "Stop!" Vanessa jumped, the tea splashing onto the carpet, missing Isabella by an inch. She spun around, her eyes widening in shock, then narrowing into fury when she saw who it was. "You," Vanessa scoffed. "The maid. Get out before I have you skinned." Sophie didn't retreat. She marched into the room, placing herself between the wheelchair and Vanessa. She was half Vanessa's size, wearing a ragged uniform, but she stood like a statue. "Don't touch her," Sophie said, her voice shaking but firm. "Don't you dare touch her again." Vanessa laughed, setting the cup down on the vanity. "Or what?" "You'll tell Enzo." "Who do you think he'll believe, the woman he sleeps with, or the daughter of a thief who steals our silverware?" Vanessa took a step forward, raising her hand to slap Sophie. "Know your place, rat." Sophie caught Vanessa's wrist. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Vanessa looked shocked. No one touched Vanessa Sterling. "My place," Sophie whispered, her eyes burning, "is right here." The standoff lasted only seconds, but it felt like hours. Vanessa ripped her arm away from Sophie's grip. Her face contorted in humiliation. "You're dead," Vanessa spat. "You hear me? You're dead." Vanessa lunged, not at Sophie, but at the medical alert button on the wall. She was going to call security. She was going to spin the narrative right now. Claim Sophie attacked her. Claim Sophie attacked Isabella. Sophie saw it happening in slow motion. If those guards came up, Sophie would be dragged to the basement. No questions asked. Sophie did the unthinkable. She didn't run. She didn't beg. She grabbed a heavy brass statue of a lion from the bedside table, a gift from the Sicilian Prime Minister to Lorenzo, and she swung it. Crack! She smashed the medical alert panel just as Vanessa's finger was about to press it. Sparks flew, and the plastic shattered. Vanessa shrieked, recoiling. "You crazy batch! You destroyed Moretti property. I'm saving Moretti property." Sophie panted, her chest heaving. She dropped the statue and turned to Isabella. With trembling fingers, she began untying the silk scarf binding the old woman's wrists. "Get away from her," Vanessa screamed, grabbing a handful of Sophie's hair and yanking her back. Sophie cried out, stumbling, but she twisted her body and shoved Vanessa hard. Vanessa, wearing 6-inch stiletto heels, lost her balance. She flailed her arms, windmilling, and fell backward over the ottoman. She hit the floor with a loud thud, her head cracking against the leg of the antique wardrobe. Vanessa groaned, dazed, clutching her head. Blood trickled from her hairline. Sophie stood over her, breathing hard. She had just assaulted the fiancé of the Don. She had signed her death warrant. "Sophie," Isabella's weak voice broke the tension. Sophie rushed to the wheelchair, falling to her knees. "I'm here, Mrs. Moretti. I'm here." She hurts me," Isabella whispered, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "She tells Lorenzo lies." "I know," Sophie soothed, wiping the blood from Isabella's lip with her apron. "I know." Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. Fast, multiple men. Sophie froze. The noise of the struggle, the smashing statue, the scream, the fall had been heard. The door burst open. It wasn't the guards. It was Lorenzo. He stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, his black trench coat dripping onto the floor. His gun was drawn, held low at his side. Behind him stood his consigliere, Bruno, a man the size of a vending machine. Lorenzo's eyes swept the room. He saw the shattered alarm panel. He saw the brass lion on the floor. He saw his mother crying in her wheelchair. And he saw Vanessa on the floor, bleeding from the head, sobbing hysterically. "Enzo," Vanessa wailed, pointing a shaking finger at Sophie. "Help me. She went crazy. She tried to kill me. She was hurting Isabella, and I tried to stop her, and she attacked me." Lorenzo's gaze shifted to Sophie. Sophie was on her knees beside Isabella, her hands covered in Isabella's blood from wiping the lip and Vanessa's blood from the shove. To an outsider, she looked like the aggressor. Lorenzo holstered his gun. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. He walked slowly toward Sophie. The sound of his wet boots on the hardwood was the only sound in the world. "Sophie," Lorenzo said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. "Get up." Sophie stood, her legs trembling so violently she nearly fell. She looked at Vanessa, who was smirking through her fake tears. She looked at Lorenzo, the man who could snap her neck with one hand. Sophie started, her throat dry. "Silence," Lorenzo commanded. He looked at Vanessa. "She attacked you." "Yes," Vanessa cried, pulling herself up, clinging to Lorenzo's wet coat. "Look at me, Enzo. Look at your mother." This peasant was shaking her, stealing her jewelry. I caught her and she went feral. Lorenzo looked at his mother. Isabella was staring at the floor, muttering unintelligibly, traumatized into silence. She couldn't defend Sophie. Lorenzo turned back to Sophie. He towered over her. He reached out and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look into his dark, abyss-like eyes. "Is this true?" he asked. Sophie looked at him. She knew if she denied it, he wouldn't believe her. She had no proof. Vanessa was his life. Sophie was a debt. "No," Sophie whispered. "Liar!" Vanessa shrieked. "Bruno, take her to the basement. Teach her a lesson." Lorenzo didn't let go of Sophie's chin. He studied her eyes. He saw the fear, yes. But he saw something else. Defiance. "Bruno," Lorenzo said, never breaking eye contact with Sophie. "Yes, boss." Bruno grunted, stepping forward to grab Sophie. "Take Vanessa to the guest room. Call the doctor." Vanessa froze. "What?" "And take Sophie." Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a growl. "To my office. Lock the door. No one goes in or out." "Enzo, why are you taking her to your office?" Vanessa demanded, panic flaring in her eyes. "She belongs in the kennel." Lorenzo turned to Vanessa, his face unreadable. "I decide where people belong, Vanessa. Not you." He turned back to Sophie. "Walk." Sophie walked. She didn't know if she was walking toward salvation or an execution. But as she passed Vanessa, she saw the flicker of true fear in the other woman's eyes. And for the first time, Sophie realized that the unthinkable act wasn't attacking Vanessa. The unthinkable act was that Sophie had just started a game she had no idea how to play, and Lorenzo Moretti was the one holding the dice. The office of Lorenzo Moretti was a fortress within a fortress. The walls were lined with mahogany bookshelves filled with first editions and legal texts, a facade for a man who operated outside the law. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting long, dancing shadows across the Persian rug. Sophie stood in the center of the room, shivering. Her uniform was damp from the rain that had blown in through the open terrace doors earlier, and her hands were still sticky with the blood she had wiped from Isabella's face. Lorenzo sat behind his massive desk. He didn't shout. He didn't pace. He poured 2 fingers of amber scotch into a crystal glass, took a slow sip and set it down. The sound of the glass touching the wood echoed like a gunshot. "Sit," Lorenzo said, gesturing to the leather chair opposite him. Sophie hesitated. I shouldn't. I'll dirty the leather." "Sit," he repeated, his voice dropping an octave. Sophie sat. She sat on the edge, ready to bolt, though she knew there was nowhere to go. "You have worked for my family for 6 months," Lorenzo said, picking up a file from his desk. He didn't look at her. He read the papers. "Sophie Miller, Father Arthur Miller. Debts totaling $54,000 to the Moretti loan sharks. Interest compounding daily." He looked up, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "You are desperate. Desperate people do desperate things, like assaulting the future mistress of this house to steal a ring, or perhaps to vent frustration." "I didn't steal anything," Sophie said, her voice trembling but clear. "And I didn't attack her out of frustration. I attacked her because she was going to burn your mother." Lorenzo's expression didn't change. "Burn her with the tea." Sophie said the words, spilling out fast now. She had Isabella tied to the chair with a scarf. Isabella was crying. Vanessa was pouring scalding tea on her. She said, Sophie choked back a sob. She said once she had your ring, she was going to throw Isabella into a state home. A filthy one. Lorenzo stared at her. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 20. Vanessa Sterling is a woman of high standing, Lorenzo said, slowly leaning back. Her father, Conrad Sterling, controls the shipping lanes I need for my imports. She is educated, poised, and, according to everyone, a saint. She's a monster, Sophie whispered. Please, sir, look at your mother's arms. The bruises aren't from falls. Look at how your mother flinches when Vanessa walks into the room. Animals know when a predator is near. Your mother knows. Lorenzo stood up abruptly. Sophie flinched, expecting a strike. Instead, Lorenzo walked to the window, looking out at the rain-lashed grounds. Do you know why I haven't killed you yet, Sophie? He asked, his back to her. No, she breathed. Because my mother stopped smiling 3 years ago, Lorenzo said quietly. But last week I saw her through the kitchen window. She was laughing. You were feeding her soup and you were making funny faces. It was the first time I've seen her look human since the stroke. Sophie's heart skipped a beat. He had been watching Lorenzo turned around. I'm a man who deals in facts. Vanessa says you are crazy. You say she is abusive. One of you is lying. And in my world, liars don't get fired. They get buried. He pressed a button on his intercom. Bruno. The door opened instantly. The giant consigliere stepped in. Boss, go to my mother's room, Lorenzo ordered. Check the carpet next to the wheelchair. Tell me if it's wet. Bruno nodded and left. Sophie held her breath. If Vanessa had cleaned it up. If the rug had dried. Minutes passed. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The door opened again. Bruno walked in. His face was grim. The carpet is soaked, boss. Bruno grunted. Smells like Earl Grey. And I found this under the chair. Bruno walked over and placed a jagged shard of ceramic on the desk. It was a piece of the teacup Vanessa had dropped. Lorenzo looked at the shard. Then he looked at Sophie. The carpet is wet, Lorenzo said. That proves a spill. It doesn't prove intent. Vanessa could say it was an accident during the struggle. She tied her up, Sophie cried. The scarf. Gone, Bruno said. Vanessa must have taken it. Lorenzo sighed, rubbing his temples. He was a strategic genius, a man who outmaneuvered the FBI and the Russian mob, but he was trapped in his own home. He needed the alliance with Sterling. He couldn't execute Sterling's daughter based on the word of a maid without starting a war that would burn New York to the ground. He needed absolute, undeniable proof. Sophie, Lorenzo said, his voice hard again. You are in a dangerous position. You have humiliated my fiancée. You have made an accusation you cannot prove. I'm telling the truth. I know, Lorenzo said. The words hung in the air. Sophie blinked. You believe me? I believe my gut, Lorenzo said, walking around the desk until he was standing right in front of her. He smelled of rain, expensive cologne, and danger. He leaned down, placing a hand on the armrest of her chair, trapping her. But believing you isn't enough to save you, he whispered. Vanessa will want your head. Her father will demand it. If I let you go, you look guilty. If I punish you, I punish the only person protecting my mother. He looked deep into her eyes, searching for something. So we are going to play a game, Sophie Miller. A very dangerous game. Are you brave enough? Sophie looked at the scar above his eyebrow, the steel in his jaw. She thought of her father. She thought of Isabella. "What do I have to do?" she asked. "You are going to be my prisoner," Lorenzo said. "I will tell Vanessa I am keeping you here to interrogate you personally, to torture the truth out of you. This will satisfy her bloodlust for now. And then... Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. "You are going to be my eyes and ears. You are going to help me catch her, not with a spilled cup of tea. I need her to admit it. I need her to show her true face when she thinks no one is watching." "She'll kill me," Sophie said. "Not while you belong to me," Lorenzo vowed. The possession in his voice sent a shiver down her spine, not of fear, but of something electric. "From this moment on, you are under my protection. But to the world, you are a rat in a trap." While Sophie was being interrogated in the East Wing, Vanessa Sterling was in the guest suite pacing like a caged tiger. She held an ice pack to her head where she had hit the wardrobe. She pulled out her burner phone, a device Lorenzo knew nothing about. She dialed a number that wasn't saved. "Yeah," a gravelly voice answered. "It's me," Vanessa hissed. "We have a problem." On the other end of the line was Stefano. Romano, a high-ranking capo in the Moretti crime family. He was Lorenzo's cousin, his second in command, and the man who secretly wanted Lorenzo's throne. He and Vanessa had been lovers for a year, plotting the slow downfall of the wolf. "What did you do, Ness?" Stefano asked, sounding bored. "The maid, the little rat Sophie. She walked in on me, disciplining the old hag." "You hit Isabella?" Stefano sighed. "You're sloppy, Vanessa. I told you to wait until the wedding. Once the ring is on, you can wheel her off a cliff for all I care. But right now, Lorenzo worships her." "I didn't hit her. I was just threatening her," Vanessa snapped. "But the maid went psycho. She smashed the alarm. She shoved me. Lorenzo walked in." "Does he know?" "He took the maid to his office," Vanessa said, her voice trembling with rage. "He's been in there for an hour. Why hasn't he shot her yet? Why didn't he let the guards take her? He's listening to her, Stefano. I can feel it." "Lorenzo isn't stupid," Stefano warned. "If he sniffs a lie, he'll dig." "We need to bury her," Vanessa said. "We need to make sure that even if she talks, no one listens. I need you to do something for me." "What?" "The necklace. The Moretti sapphire. The one Isabella gave me for the engagement." "Yeah, I'm going to say she stole it." Vanessa plotted a cruel smile spreading across her face. "But that's not enough. Theft is petty. We need treason." "Treason. Plant the blueprints," Vanessa whispered. "The blueprints for the new casino construction. Put them in her father's apartment. Make it look like she's selling Lorenzo's secrets to the Russo family." Stefano chuckled darkly. "That's coldness. Lorenzo hates rats more than anything. If he thinks she's a spy, he won't just kill her. He'll make it last." "Good," Vanessa said, touching the bump on her head. "Do it tonight. And Stefano. What? Send someone to pay a visit to her father, Arthur Miller. Just a friendly reminder to keep his daughter's mouth shut. Break a few fingers. Consider it done." Vanessa hung up and threw the phone onto the bed. She walked to the mirror and adjusted her hair to cover the bandage. She practiced her crying face. She needed to look fragile. She needed to look like the victim. She opened her purse and pulled out a small vial of clear liquid. Digitalis. It was a heart medication, but in high doses it caused confusion, hallucinations, and eventually cardiac arrest. She had been giving Isabella microdoses for months to mimic dementia. "Time to up the dosage," Vanessa whispered to her reflection. If Isabella had a medical emergency tonight, and Sophie was the one who prepared her meds earlier, well, that would be the nail in the coffin. The storm outside had intensified. Thunder rattled the window panes of the Moretti estate. Lorenzo had kept his word. He had locked Sophie in a small storage room adjacent to his office. It had a cot and a sink, but no windows. It was a cell, but it was safe. Sophie sat on the cot, unable to sleep. Her mind was racing. She was playing a game against a woman who had the resources of a shipping empire and the heart of a snake. Suddenly, a scream pierced the house. "Help, someone! Help!" It was Vanessa. Sophie jumped up and ran to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. She heard heavy footsteps running past. "Get the doctor! Get Dr. Aris now!" It was Lorenzo's voice, booming with panic. Sophie pounded on the door. "Let me out! What's happening?" No one answered. Minutes later, the door unlocked. It wasn't Lorenzo, it was Bruno. He looked frantic. "Boss wants you! Now!" Bruno grabbed her arm and dragged her out. They didn't go to the office. They went to Isabella's room. The scene was chaotic. Isabella was thrashing in her bed. Her eyes rolled back in her head, foam gathering at the corners of her mouth. Her heart monitor was beeping erratically, a terrifying fast rhythm. Vanessa was standing by the bed, sobbing into a handkerchief. "I don't know what happened. I came in to check on her. And she was like this. She was fine before she gave her the medicine." Vanessa pointed a shaking finger at Sophie as she entered the room. Lorenzo was holding his mother down, trying to keep her from hurting herself. His face was pale. "Dr. Aris is 10 minutes out." "We don't have 10 minutes." Sophie looked at Isabella. She looked at the monitor. Tachycardia. Sophie had spent years taking care of her own mother before she died. She knew the meds Isabella was on. "What did she take?" Sophie shouted over the noise, rushing to the bedside table. "Get her away," Vanessa shrieked. "She's the one who poisoned her." Lorenzo looked up, his eyes wild. "Sophie, stay back." "Look at the monitor," Sophie yelled, ignoring the Don's order. "Her heart rate is 180. Did she take her digoxin?" "Yes," Lorenzo said. "Sophie, you prepared the tray at 600 p.m. "I prepared to the standard dose." Sophie grabbed the pill bottle from the nightstand. It was empty. "This was full yesterday," Sophie said, her blood running cold. She looked at Vanessa. Vanessa's eyes were hard, daring her to speak. "She's overdosing," Sophie realized. "She needs potassium. Now, we wait for the doctor," Vanessa insisted, trying to block Sophie. "She'll be dead in 2 minutes," Sophie screamed. She turned to Lorenzo. "Trust me. Please, I'm not a doctor, but I know this. If we don't slow her heart down, she dies." Lorenzo looked at his dying mother. Then he looked at the maid he had just threatened to torture. "Do it," Lorenzo commanded. Sophie didn't hesitate. "Bruno." "The kitchen." "Get me bananas, get me avocado, anything with potassium." "No, that's too slow to eat." She scanned the room. "Is there a medical kit? Is there charcoal?" "In the bathroom," Lorenzo said. Sophie sprinted to the bathroom. She found the emergency-activated charcoal slurry standard for households with heavily medicated patients. She ran back. "Hold her head up." Lorenzo propped Isabella up. Sophie forced the charcoal liquid into Isabella's mouth. "Swallow, Isabella. Please swallow." Isabella gagged, then swallowed. "Again," Sophie urged. For 5 agonizing minutes they worked. Sophie massaged Isabella's throat. Lorenzo held her hand. Vanessa stood in the corner, her face a mask of fake concern. but her knuckles were white as she gripped the bedpost. She was praying for the old woman to die. Slowly, the beeping on the monitor began to space out. Beep. 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 The thrashing stopped. Isabella slumped back against the pillows, breathing shallowly but rhythmically. The door burst open. Dr. Aris, a balding man with a frantic expression, rushed in with his bag. He checked the vitals. He checked the pupils. He looked at the empty bottle of digoxin and the charcoal on the nightstand. "Who administered the charcoal?" Dr. Aris asked. "She did," Lorenzo said, nodding at Sophie. The doctor let out a breath. "You saved her life, young lady. Another few minutes and her heart would have exploded." Lorenzo slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. The relief washed over the room like a wave, but the wave crashed when Vanessa spoke up. Her voice shrill. "She saved her," Vanessa scoffed. "She's the one who tried to kill her. She's the one who gave her the wrong pills earlier. This is just a show. She's trying to cover her tracks because she knew she'd get caught." Lorenzo raised his head. The vulnerability was gone. The wolf was back. He stood up and walked over to Sophie. She was wiping charcoal off her hands, exhausted. "Is that true?" Lorenzo asked. "Did you mess up the dosage?" "No," Sophie said firmly. "I gave her one pill. Someone else gave her the rest." "Liar!" Vanessa cried. "Who else has access? Just you and me, and I would never hurt Mama." Suddenly, Bruno's phone buzzed. He answered it, listened, and his face went dark. "Boss," Bruno interrupted. "We have a situation." "Not now, Bruno." "It's about the girl," Bruno said, glaring at Sophie. "My guys just swept her father's apartment looking for leverage. They found something." Bruno walked over and handed Lorenzo a rolled-up set of papers. Lorenzo unrolled them. They were blueprints, detailed schematics of the Moretti underground casino vaults, the very vaults that were supposed to be secret. Lorenzo went very still. He looked at the blueprints. He looked at Sophie. "Why were these in your father's apartment, Sophie?" Lorenzo asked, his voice deadly quiet. Sophie's eyes widened. I don't know. I've never seen those. She's a spy," Vanessa shouted triumph, ringing in her voice. "I told you. She's working for the Russos. She poisoned your mother to distract you while her father sold your secrets. It was the perfect frame job, motive opportunity, and physical evidence." Lorenzo rolled up the blueprints. His face was unreadable. He looked at Sophie, who was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. She had just saved his mother, but the evidence of betrayal was in his hand. Lorenzo had to make a choice. If he showed mercy now with this evidence in front of his men, he looked weak. If he let a spy live, his empire would crumble. But he remembered the charcoal. He remembered the fear in her eyes when she fought to save Isabella. Lorenzo made his move. He grabbed Sophie by the arm roughly. "Get her out of here!" Lorenzo roared, shoving her toward Bruno. "Take her to the gatehouse. Lock her in the cellar. No food. No water." "Enzo, kill her," Vanessa demanded. "She's a traitor." "Death is too easy," Lorenzo snarled, turning to Vanessa. His eyes were wood-acting the part of the betrayed beast. "I want her to suffer first. I want to know who she's working for. She doesn't die until she gives me a name." He looked back at Sophie as Bruno dragged her away. "Get her out of my sight," Sophie screamed as she was hauled into the hallway. "I didn't do it, Lorenzo, please. It's a lie." The door slammed shut. Silence returned to the room. Lorenzo turned to the window, his back to Vanessa. "Oh, Enzo," Vanessa cooed, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "I'm so sorry. I knew there was something wrong with her. But don't worry. I'm here. We're safe now." Lorenzo stared at his reflection in the dark glass. He saw Vanessa's reflection behind him. He saw the predator smiling. "Yes." Lorenzo said, his hand resting on his gun holster. "We're safe now." But in his mind, he was already calculating. He hadn't sent Sophie to the torture chamber. He had sent her to the gatehouse, the only building on the property with no cameras inside. And he had sent her with Bruno, the only man he trusted with his life. The war had begun, and Vanessa had just made her first mistake. She thought she had won. The cellar of the gatehouse was cold, smelling of damp earth and old wine. Sophie sat on a wooden crate, her knees pulled to her chest. It had been 24 hours since Bruno had dragged her down here. She hadn't slept. Every creak of the floorboards above made her jump, expecting Lorenzo or an executioner to descend the stairs. She had replayed the events 1,000 times. The tea, the struggle, the heart monitor beeping, the blueprints. "I'm going to die here," she thought, a tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. "And my father? They've probably killed him already." The heavy iron door at the top of the stairs creaked open. Light flooded the darkness. Sophie scrambled back against the stone wall, her breath hitching. Heavy boots descended the stairs. It was Bruno. And he wasn't alone. Lorenzo Moretti walked into the cellar. He was still wearing the suit from the night before, but his tie was gone and his eyes were rimmed with red. He looked like a man walking through fire. He held a tray of food, steaming pasta fresh bread and a bottle of water. Sophie stared at him confused. "Is this the last meal?" Lorenzo set the tray down on a barrel. He looked at her, and for the first time the mask of the ruthless Don slipped completely. He looked exhausted. "Eat," Lorenzo said gently. "I'm not hungry," Sophie whispered. "Just tell me. Are you going to kill me?" "No," Lorenzo said. He pulled up a stool and sat across from her. "I'm sorry, Sophie. I had to be rough with you in the bedroom. I had to make it look real." Sophie blinked. "Make what look real?" "The rage," Lorenzo said. "If Vanessa thought for 1 second that I believed you, she would have called her father. Conrad Sterling would have pulled his funding, and my family would be at war with half the city within the hour. I needed her to think she won." "So, you know I didn't steal the blueprints?" "I know," Lorenzo said. His jaw tightened. "My men traced the paper. The blueprints were printed at a shop in Jersey owned by my cousin Stefano, and the timestamp on the security footage showed one of Stefano's runners planting them in your father's apartment an hour before we found them." Sophie let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for a lifetime. "Thank God." "And the medical alert panel you smashed," Lorenzo continued, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small, battered memory chip. "It records audio on a loop for security. The tech boys recovered the last 10 minutes before impact." He placed the chip on the barrel. "I heard it, Sophie. I heard her call my mother a witch. I heard the water splashing. I heard you begging her to stop." Lorenzo's voice cracked. He looked down at his hands that had beaten men to death, now trembling with suppressed fury. "You saved her twice, once from the burns and once from the poison, and I threw you in a cellar." "You did what you had to do." Sophie said softly, reaching out to touch his hand. Lorenzo looked at her fingers on his skin. Tonight is the engagement party. It was supposed to be a small dinner, but Vanessa pushed for a gala. She wants to cement her place as the Queen of New York immediately. She thinks you're dead. She thinks my mother is a vegetable. Lorenzo stood up, his eyes turning to black ice. Tonight we are going to show the world exactly who Vanessa Sterling is. But I need you to do one more brave thing, Sophie. Anything, she said. I need you to walk into the lion's den, not as a maid, but as the witness. The Moretti estate had been transformed. The lawn was covered by a massive white marquee illuminated by thousands of fairy lights. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. Champagne flowed like water. The elite of New York were there. Judges, politicians, rival mob bosses under a temporary truce, and the shipping magnate Conrad Sterling looking smug as he held court near the ice sculpture. Vanessa was the center of attention. She wore a custom Vera Wang gown, white silk, that trailed behind her like a royal train. The Moretti sapphire, the necklace she claimed Sophie had stolen, was back around her neck. She had miraculously found it that morning, claiming the maid must have dropped it in panic. She circulated the room, accepting congratulations. "How is dear Isabella?" a senator's wife asked. Vanessa sighed tragically, touching her chest. "Oh, it's heartbreaking. The attack by that deranged maid was too much for her. She's bedridden. The doctors say, well, they say it won't be long now, but I'll stay by her side until the end." "You're a saint, Vanessa," the woman said. "I do what I can." Vanessa smiled. Across the room, Stefano watched, swirling his scotch. He caught Vanessa's eye and winked. They had won. The maid was gone. Bruno had told them she was taken care of in the Jersey marshes. Lorenzo was broken, grieving his mother's decline, and ready to hand over the keys to the kingdom. At 9:00 p.m., the music stopped. Lorenzo walked onto the stage. He looked impeccable in a black tuxedo, but his face was grim. He tapped the microphone. "Thank you all for coming." Lorenzo's voice boomed over the speakers. "Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of love. A union between the Moretti and Sterling families." Vanessa walked up the stairs to stand beside him, beaming. She looped her arm through his. "But," Lorenzo continued, "tonight is also a night of truth." Vanessa's smile faltered slightly. She felt a muscle in Lorenzo's arm twitch. It was hard as rock. "My fiancé has been telling you all about the tragedy that befell my mother," Lorenzo said. "About a maid who went crazy. About a theft." He looked at the crowd. "But I believe in evidence, and I think you all deserve to see the evidence." "Enzo, what are you doing?" Vanessa whispered through her teeth. "Stick to the script." "Roll it," Lorenzo commanded. A massive projection screen behind them, which had been displaying photos of the happy couple, suddenly went black. Then static. Then audio. Clear as day. "You ruined my manicure, you senile old witch." The crowd gasped. Vanessa froze. It was her voice. "Once you're gone, and I have the ring, I'm sending you to the cheapest, filthiest state home I can find. But first, you need to learn respect." On the screen, a video played. It wasn't the bedroom scene, there were no cameras there. It was footage from the kitchen taken 2 weeks ago. Hidden security footage Lorenzo had dug up from the archives. It showed Vanessa pinching Isabella's arm hard, making the old woman cry out. It showed Vanessa spitting into Isabella's soup before feeding it to her. The room was deadly silent. The only sound was the horrific video and the quartet who had stopped playing in shock. "Turn it off!" Vanessa shrieked, her poise shattering. "It's a fake. It's deep fake technology." "He's trying to frame me." "Is this fake too?" Lorenzo asked. He pointed to the back of the marquee. The crowd parted. Bruno walked in, pushing a wheelchair. In the chair sat Isabella Moretti. She was pale, but she was sitting upright. She was wearing a beautiful blue dress, her hair brushed and styled. And pushing the wheelchair was Sophie. Sophie wore a simple black evening gown Lorenzo had provided. She looked terrified, but she held her head high. "Mama," Lorenzo said, his voice choking up. Isabella looked at the stage. She lifted a shaking hand and pointed at Vanessa. Isabella's voice was weak, amplified by the silence of the room. "She hurt me. Poison." "No." Vanessa backed away, tripping over her train. "She's senile. She doesn't know what she's saying." Conrad. Sterling stepped forward, his face purple with rage. "Lorenzo, what is the meaning of this?" "You humiliate my daughter. Your daughter," Lorenzo said, his voice turning into a growl that shook the floorboards. "Poisoned my mother with digitalis. She framed an innocent woman, and she conspired to sell my secrets to the Russos." Lorenzo snapped his fingers. 2 guards dragged a man onto the stage from the wings. It was the shop owner from Jersey, Stefano's man. He was bloody and weeping. "Tell them," Lorenzo barked. "It was Stefano." The man sobbed into the microphone. "Stefano and Vanessa. They paid me to print the blueprints. They planted them on the maid's father. They wanted to take over the family." Stefano, realizing the game was up, pulled a gun from his jacket. "Don't move," Stefano screamed, aiming at Lorenzo. Panic erupted. Guests screamed and dove under tables. "You ruined everything, Lorenzo," Stefano yelled, his eyes wild. "You were supposed to be the grieving son. I was supposed to take the chair." "You were never fit for the chair, cousin," Lorenzo said calmly. He didn't even flinch at the gun barrel pointed at his chest. "You don't have the discipline." "I have the gun," Stefano shouted. He shifted his aim not at Lorenzo, but at Sophie. "If I'm going down, I'm taking your little pet with me." Bang! The gunshot echoed like a cannon blast. Sophie squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the pain. It never came. Stefano dropped to his knees, a look of shock on his face. A crimson stain blossomed on his chest. He fell forward, face-planting onto the stage. Lorenzo stood there, his own gun smoking in his hand. He had drawn and fired faster than the eye could follow. The Wolf of Brooklyn didn't miss. Lorenzo holstered his weapon and turned to Vanessa. She was on her knees, sobbing, her white dress ruined by the dirt of the stage and the splatter of Stefano's blood. She looked up at Lorenzo, her eyes pleading. "Enzo, baby, he forced me. Stefano forced me. I love you. I only did it because I was scared." Lorenzo looked down at her. He didn't see a fiancée. He didn't see a shipping heiress. He saw a cockroach. "You love nothing," Lorenzo said coldly. "Conrad," he addressed Vanessa's father, who was standing there, pale and trembling. "Take your daughter," Lorenzo said. "If I see her in New York again, she dies. If she contacts my family, she dies. If she speaks my name, she dies." He leaned in close to Vanessa. "And if you ever come near a vulnerable old woman again, I will find you, and I will peel the skin from your bones. Get her out of here." Security guards grabbed Vanessa by the arms and dragged her away. Kicking and screaming, her reputation destroyed her life in ruins. Lorenzo didn't watch her go. He jumped off the stage and walked straight to the back of the room. He stopped in front of Sophie and his mother. He knelt down and kissed Isabella's hand. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm so sorry. I didn't see it." Isabella stroked his hair. "You see now, Enzo. You see now." Lorenzo stood up and looked at Sophie. The room was still silent, hundreds of eyes watching them. "You saved my life," Lorenzo said to her. "You saved my mother. You saved this family." "I just did what was right," Sophie whispered. "No," Lorenzo said, shaking his head. "You did what was unthinkable. You stood up to a monster when you had no power. That isn't just right. That is power." He took her hand. It was rough from scrubbing floors calloused from hard work. He brought it to his lips and kissed her knuckles right in front of the elite of New York. "The debt is cleared, Sophie Miller," Lorenzo announced. "Your father is safe. Your life is your own." Sophie felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you." But Lorenzo added, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. "I am currently without a fiancé, and I find myself in need of someone who is honest, brave, and loyal. Someone who isn't afraid of the wolf." He smiled a genuine, crooked smile that lit up his face. "Would you consider a promotion?" Sophie laughed through her tears. She looked at the scary Mafia Don, the man who had terrified her for months, and she saw the man beneath. The protector. "I might consider it," she smiled. "But I'm not making any tea." Lorenzo laughed, a rich, booming sound that signaled the end of the dark times. He pulled her into his arms, ignoring the blood, the chaos, and the audience, and kissed her. It wasn't a staged kiss. It was a promise. The wolf had found his mate, and the maid had become the queen. And that is how Sophie Miller went from a debt-ridden maid to the only woman Lorenzo Moretti ever bowed down to. Vanessa Sterling ended up disowned by her father, living in exile in a small apartment in Ohio, working double shifts at a diner, a fitting punishment for a woman who treated service workers like dirt. Isabella made a miraculous recovery under Sophie's care, living another 10 years to see her grandchildren. The story of the maid who smashed a lion statue to save an old woman became a legend in the New York underworld. It serves as a brutal reminder: title and money don't make you noble. Character does. And if you cross the wolf's family, and make sure you don't miss. Wow, what a roller coaster. If you felt the satisfaction when Vanessa finally got caught, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel. What would you have done if you were Sophie? Would you have run away or stayed to fight? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next dramatic story. See you next time.